Um, all right. And so, what we're going to be talking about this afternoon is specifically anticipatory grief. Um, Grief in general can be the loss of anything. It can be a person, it could be a job, it could be some treasure that you have, but it could be the loss of anything. And so we're going to narrow the focus down a little bit from the loss of anything to specifically the people that we serve, that we love, that we think about. So we're specifically talking about anticipatory grief in the light of the loss of a person. So as we go through this, we will be keep in mind that we're talking specifically about uh, person loss here. Um, Here's an agenda that we have for this afternoon, and I'm going to hit each of these points. I guess the introduction has already been accomplished there, and so we're going to go through each of these points, and hopefully be able to answer questions as we go along. Um, I haven't done this before. Usually we just have Q&A afterwards, but I really want to start to build on some of these concepts as we're going through. So if you have a question, feel free to ask the question. I've asked Ms. Cummins to on the chat to monitor the chat for questions, and she can, I guess, break in and ask me, and we'll go from there. We'll try to figure out the right answers, and if I don't have the answers, and if we can't find the answers within our group here, um, then we will certainly write it down and find the answer. Um, as we speak with a group like this, you being caregivers and folks in the community working with patients and experiencing this anticipatory grief, this anticipatory loss firsthand, you may have answers that I don't know, and I need to learn from you. So that's why we need to kind of have an open forum here to talk about grief, anticipatory grief, and loss. So here is anybody's screen being blocked by the letters? Okay, I'm going to go through the first part of this. In defining anticipatory grief, we talked about um, this is a patient-focused or person-focused anticipatory grief. But as we go through this, I couldn't find a definition that was less than mechanical. And what I mean, it was very factual and very, gave very academic answers. But I was able to find something that could explain the feelings and the facts of anticipatory grief. And so, instead of trying to dissect this person's uh, explanation and their definition here, I just quoted it. And this is from Marie Curie website. That's the name of the website. I do have the sites at the end of this recording. You'll have the sites and web page information, URL information. I couldn't find the author who wrote this definition, so I couldn't identify who they are, but they give the facts and the feelings very well here in stating that anticipatory grief is when you have feelings of grief that a person while a person is still living. And that's the idea, is anticipatory grief is anticipation of losing that person. And as caregivers, I'm sure that you've encountered this in your care. I know that in hospice care, this is something that we deal with on a daily basis. And it's a natural reaction when with someone's illness is having an effect on your life. Grief has a huge impact on a person's life, and they may not see the anticipatory reactions in their own life as clearly as they see the reactions of when they've lost someone. So that's why we're going through and taking a look at this today. Oh, trying to get it to turn the page. There we go. Now I've broken up this talk into three primary groups, actually two, but three realistically. Family grief or family um, anticipation of a death, primary caregivers of anticipation of a death, and secondary caregivers. And these kind of overlap in the middle there. Of course, the family is the family. Those sons and daughters and grandchildren or parents even who are anticipating the loss of a family member, how that impacts them. Primary caregivers, who I imagine this most of this group is primary caregivers, those who are invited into the homes of folks that are struggling with illness or death, or and how you perceive that, how you feel that anticipatory grief. And finally, on the fringes, secondary caregiver. This is more of the nurses who work in the office but have contact with the patient occasionally, or even doctors who see that patient on occasion, but not necessarily as much as the primary caregivers who are there providing those activities of daily living and holding hands and touching and learning to love that person at home. So those are the folks that we'll be focusing on mostly today.
John, if I could just share with you,
Sure.
I think most of the people on the call today are actually family caregivers.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll certainly be talking about that, and as we go into talking about anticipatory grief. In fact, here's the first slide: grief of a family. That's those folks that if you're caring for a mom or dad who's at the home, or grandmom or grandfather, and of course, recently I have run into several parents who are caring for children at home, their children, adult children, who are dealing with terminal illness, which is it's a whole new dynamic that I haven't been used to recently. But I've seen an influx of adult children being the ones who are in terminal crisis. Feelings of sadness and pending loss. Of course, everyone knows the general feeling of loss, and of certainly caregivers at home know these feelings of the possibility of loss and hurt that you feel from these the decline of your family member, watching them, caring for them. Um, when you step away and come back, you may feel that it's progressed forward, and that you've been out of the loop for long, but because you're there daily, because you're there providing every bit of that care, you don't see the progression of that loss as you normally would, because you're there experiencing that loss with them, that anticipation of loss with them. And you do anticipate the stages of grief, just like a person would anticipate the stages of grief after someone passes away. As we deal with pending loss, as we deal with those that we're caring for on a daily basis, you may not see it in yourself, but you will be experiencing those stages of grief. And it's hard not to go back to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her five stages of grief. that we deal with. Do you remember those? Those denial and anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance. Those five stages of grief are certainly evident in the grief after the loss of a patient, but also in anticipatory grief. And I'll give you a little history here. Um, Kubler-Ross wrote these five stages of grief as she observed uh, people in their final stages of life. So she is actually giving a reflection of anticipatory grief. So I think that the five stages of grief that she offers are better adapted to us as caregivers providing that grief or providing that care before the loss. So think about those and see if you can identify those in your walk with the person. Remember denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So also we want to talk about anxiety in regard to the life after loss. And we'll go a little deeper into this because this affects the family members, especially. Um, you think about these questions of who am I to lean on? This person, my mom, she's always been there. And when she passes away, I'm not going to have her to lean on. I'm not going to have her to talk with. I'm going to lose my person that I go to make decisions, to get direction. Or if a husband is passing, um, you may have a more practical view of this. Perhaps I'm losing a pension, or I'm losing my husband. Yes, of course, the emotional part of that, but also the economic impact. I'm losing a pension or Social Security check, or my income is going to be significantly reduced when my husband passes or wife passes. So these are things that we have to deal with. Um, who 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 am I going to love when my loved one passes? Who's going to be my friend when my sister dies? These are all anticipatory grief responses and things that we deal with as we watch someone in this process. And the last one here that I wanted to mention, oh gosh, sorry about that, for families is guilt or lost opportunities. Guilt being those things of I should have done it this way, or if I had just done it that way, or lost opportunity. Perhaps you're the one that you're caring for um, is no longer verbal or no longer is able to communicate with you. Is there lost opportunity there? Was there something that you needed to hear from them or something that you needed to say to them that they could have um, that you missed on the opportunity to do that. And those are all parts of anticipatory loss are moving through these little losses, the lowercase losses as you move through the life of your um, family member or someone that you're caring for in the community. And we're going to come back again to this concept of the what ifs and the I should have questions. So the next part is about caregiver grief in anticipation. And I'm speaking about caregivers, maybe paid caregivers or caregivers who like physicians or nurses that come in the home. So I'll make this a little shorter because my audience is mostly focused around family caregivers. We talk about the secondary caregivers and tertiary caregivers being the nurse practitioners, the physicians, and agencies. private caregivers in the home also have to look out for this anticipatory grief. Of course, they're going to be dealing with sadness and those stages of loss, and also anxiety in regard to that life lost. They may have made a friend. And I, I generally put a little caveat here because I think a lot of times in nursing, they push the idea of professional boundaries. And yes, there need to be professional boundaries. But unfortunately, when you're caring for someone and you're at the bedside of someone, um, professional boundaries don't always protect your heart from caring for that person, for giving love to that person. And of course, in regard to losing that person, you're going to feel grief. You're going to anticipate their loss. And another thing that you have to think about in caregiver grief is if you're a private caregiver and this is the patient that you're caring for, when this patient passes away, you're going to have to look for a new patient. You're going to have to look for a new job, essentially. And I know that sounds cold almost, but it's important to realize that that's a part of your loss, um, because as you're anticipating that person's death, you're also anticipating major changes in your life and your ability to live uh, based uh, on their death. So this is all a part of the grief of a caregiver, both um, primary and secondary caregivers. All right, I have a question, and we'll go from here. Do you have someone that you're close to that you have feelings of sadness about because you are anticipating their loss? So it's not a hard question this time, but it's a personal question. Do you have somebody that you are anticipating a loss with that's impacting you right now? And so I'll ask that. And I think you can just pop on and talk, or you can write it in the chat if you'd like. All right, hearing nothing. I guess we'll move on.
Oh, Father
Um,
John, I can
I
share.
have some. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
This is Ann. Hi,
Yes,
nice
ma'am.
to meet you.
Good to meet you, Anne.
Right now I'm dealing with the loss of my brother-in-law. He just passed yesterday.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Of dementia. Is my twin sister husband. So that's a great sadness I have because he was a very wonderful person
Oh,
and a very loving husband and a great father. So he was just one of those um he was just a good-hearted person. Very.
oh,
So that's a great loss.
that is a great loss. I'm so
Mhm.
sorry. How old was he?
86.
86.
Yes.
Very good. As we talk about anticipatory grief, and this is so fresh because he passed away just yesterday.
Yes.
Did you did you or your family see any anticipatory grief response in his decline?
Yes.
Mm,
Absolutely. I'm here now. I came down last week and I spent 3 days at the hospital with him for about 5 hours each
yes, ma'am.
day, and I saw his deterioration, but I got some precious time in with him. And I
Yeah.
was able to, because of my experience of being a photography for so long, I was able to record him as I was feeding him, talking to him, and
Oh,
sending it to my twin sister because she was down in bed with the flu.
mhm.
So I came down to
Yes.
help her, assist her, but it worked out. It was wonderful because I was just so happy to get the opportunity to help again because I was a EMS for 9 years,
Oh,
and
wow.
and so it was just wonderful because the nurses needed my help because they were short of staff. So that was not only opportunity to see him, but opportunity to also help them to help him.
Right. And Miss Oliver, you have pointed out something that we're going to be talking about in a little bit is seizing those opportunities so that we don't have that guilt and lost opportunity. Being able to fully um, to fully grasp that time and use that time that we have in anticipation of the loss. Oh, thank you so much for
Absolutely,
sharing that.
of course.
Thank you. I'd like to share. I've got a good family friend whose mom has just been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, and they
Mm,
believe it's going to progress pretty rapidly. And so I've just been um, talking with my friend and his sister, and the anticipatory grief is showing up in many different ways. So one of them is definitely in denial. Another one's, really angry about it, and I'm really feeling grief right now for stuff they haven't done and have meant to do. So I'm definitely looking forward to when you're talking about seizing those moments and how they can really make good use of those opportunities for connection.
oh, good, good. Okay, well let's move on. Forgive me if I switch back and forth between these PowerPoints. I'm not good with PowerPoint. Let's see here. I've got a little tag in my way. There we go. So we're going to go through some examples of anticipating loss. And I have so a quote here from Eldridge from the a physician who wrote on specifically anticipating loss, and she did a good job. I wasn't 100% in agreement with all she said, but I do have the link to her article at the end of the slideshow here, and it's recorded as well. It's not a slideshow; it's a PowerPoint. Sorry, I'm showing my age. The emotions associated with anticipatory grief are similar to those that occur after loss. They can fluctuate unexpectedly. And that's what we were talking about just now with Miss Cummins, is that she could identify those who were dealing with that anticipatory loss, whether it be denial or bargaining or depression or anger. This is not a linear progression. It doesn't, oh, well, first I have to be in denial, second I have to be angry. Rather, it's really just a popcorn effect. It goes from this to that one. In fact, it could go from acceptance to anger and you not know it. It could go from depression to denial and back and forth. So there's no real rhyme or reason to these stages of grief or anticipatory grief, expecting grief. But we're going to go through some of the emotions associated with anticipatory grief. Uh-oh, it's not turning the page. There we go. And there's Lynn Eldridge, physician Lynn Eldridge. Okay, the first one that we're going to be talking about is the loss of control of one's emotions. Now, this would include intense sadness, um, that intense, they call it acute grief, acute grief in grieving terms, but you can experience this in pre-bereavement. Tearfulness, of course, the tearfulness that kind of comes out of nowhere, but is might be triggered by a word or saying something easily that can trigger that. So loss of emotion is one of those symptoms. The next one is fear, irritability, and anger. Beyond the fear of the death, you may also fear changes. We talked about that earlier, following the death. In addition to dealing with your own anger, you may have to deal with the anger of the dying person. Remember that Kubler-Ross's stages of grief were in observance of people dying. So these are the things that we're going to have to run into as caregivers as well. I'll give you a small story here. My sister, her go-to grief response is anger. And I didn't learn this until after we had lost our father. We were younger when we lost our father. He was a young man, and she was angry with my father. And you think to yourself, how does that make sense? Being angry with someone that you've lost, being angry with someone that you're grieving. But irritability, fear, and anger go hand in hand. And it certainly is a legitimate response to grief, and certainly a legitimate response to pre-bereavement. The next one is loneliness and isolation. Caregivers often find others backing away from them during the serious health crisis. And you guys might find this caring for your families as well. People don't necessarily want to be around or don't necessarily know what to say, so they back away. Caregivers with anticipatory anxiety will often feel lethargic and unmotivated, really unwilling to go into social situations and feel it more comfortable to withdraw from those situations. And talking about anxiety, that is a part of anticipatory grief. Caregivers often feel like they're living in a state of heightened anxiety, manifesting trembling, edginess, a racing heart, and other symptoms. Anxiety, panic attacks, and generalized anxiety really come to the forefront during grief and during anticipatory grief. This is something that you might want to speak with a physician about if you're struggling with that anxiety that results in heart palpitations or panic attacks. It might be time to see your physician. Another one we have here, and this is for folks that are dealing with that grief, dealing with that loss of opportunities. Guilt, feelings of guilt can occur when you want the loved one to be free of their pain. I think the number one form of guilt that I hear from families when they're talking about someone that they lost is this guilt that, gosh, I am relieved that this person has died. And they feel guilty. Why should I feel relief at my mother dying? Why should I feel relief at my husband dying? But oftentimes that comes from a tender heart. It doesn't come from wanting to get rid of the person, but wanting to see them free from pain. And that doubly goes for anticipatory grief, because if we feel, gosh, I hope that they die soon, you might internalize, man, I'm a horrible person. I'm a horrible person for wanting to see my husband pass away sooner than later. And certainly you're not. It's not a part of grief that is comfortable to deal with. But we deal with this guilt. Even if it means dying, we want to see our person out of pain. We want to see our loved one out of pain. Or you may feel the opposite, and you want your loved one to stay in spite of their pain, even if it means suffering. So that's a part of this guilt, this inner monologue that we have about what we can do for our family member, what we can do for our patients and loved ones. And another one, another symptom of this, and this especially goes from the family caregiver. The family caregiver has a rehearsal of death, intense preoccupation with the person dying. This occupation that occurs to the point of fixation. They go over making decisions in their heart, making decisions in their mind about their health. They even worry about their own health as they are working daily with that loved one or client. And we'll go to rehearsal of death now. Sorry. And I have a question about sorry. I need to go back. How do I go back? Back. There it is. All right. Sorry about that. Um, we're talking about rehearsal of death. You may be visualizing what it would be like without your loved one, without your client, or your family member. If you're dying, when you may imagine how your loved one will, if you are dying, if you're the one passing, you may imagine how your loved ones will carry on without you. So this is a part of that planning process once a person has entered into um, anticipatory grief. And my question here is, can you give an example of a symptom of anticipatory grief that you have seen or experienced? Miss Cummins gave us a good example of that, but how about you? Do you have an example of that anticipatory grief response, that symptom that you can tell us about? I'm sorry, I got little things popping up here on my screen. I'm trying to get them to go away.
I see Lauren's got her hand raised.
Yes, ma'am, Miss Fowler.
Hi there,
Hi there.
Father. For me, it is one in which all the business that has to be transacted. I am a caregiver to my elder mother, and so
Mm, yeah.
um, the anxiety that I have is a lot around making sure that her, number one, she is honored with dignity,
Okay.
and that all the I's and J's are dotted and T's are crossed in that regard. So we have already begun that phase in terms of talking to an estate planning attorney and getting her estate plan updated in terms of certain things that should be put into a trust. But there's still some details that are outstanding. And so I feel like I'm trying to race against the clock to make sure that those things are done. So that is one example of what it is like for me.
Wow. Miss Fowler, thank you for sharing that. And that's something that I didn't even think about. I didn't even think about adding that in the talk today, but ensuring dignity, ensuring what the family member would want at the end of life is important. It certainly is, and thank you for bringing that up. Um, one of the things that we deal with in hospice, and especially in bereavement care, are those estate plannings, those legal aspects of death and dying. And when a family member has worked those out 3 years before any of this happens, it goes wonderfully. However, most of us don't do that. Most of us don't have the medical power of attorney in place. We don't have our wishes in place. We don't have what to expect when we are dying and when we have passed away. So, um, Miss Fowler, you're in a very unique situation in that you are able to. I don't know if you're able to communicate with your mom still, but I'll ask you.
Yes, I am. And sometimes those conversations can be difficult because your loved one may feel some kind of way themselves about their own demise. It may be scary to them. There have been situations where perhaps there's anger or, are you trying to rush me to my grave? Those
Right.
kinds of emotions do come up, and it's really important to be able to, take a break, step back, reiterate that, this is really not about rushing or wishing, uh, your end. It's really about wanting to make sure that the love that we have demonstrated toward each other during our relationship is honored and continued.
Yes.
So that is really one of the pieces that we've been working through. I would highly recommend lining up, at least this is what I have tried to do for myself, getting a therapist in place.
Mm,
If you're experiencing it, get them on your support team now if you're already having some feelings or inkling about it, because it's harder, I think, when you are navigating it and you're in the throes of all that goes on when the actual inevitable occurs. So that is where I have found myself in this experience.
wow. There's a lot of wisdom there. Thank you so much. Thank you for
Absolutely.
sharing. Wow. That's good. And that's something we'll talk about in a bit is having a therapist or even a physician that can help in these times. Thank you so much. All right, let's see here. Okay, this is a little weird. You think about anticipatory grief as something negative. Uh, but are there benefits to anticipatory grief? Can it be beneficial? And yes, it can be. For some instances and for some people, it can be beneficial. And what are some of those benefits? That's where we're going to go through this afternoon. Miss Eldridge, Dr. Eldridge, reported that studies are conflicting on whether anticipatory grief is beneficial or not. But with individual circumstances, we can see some positive outcomes of that grief. For some, it may help them to sort out the feelings that they need to sort out beforehand, or make preparations in order to move forward with their life. So, knowing that that person is struggling with a terminal illness or is coming to the end of their life may be beneficial in helping the loved ones or helping the caregivers to anticipate how they can move on with that, um, or rather, I shouldn't have used the term move on with that, because you always live with grief, but move in the light of that loss, live in the light of that loss. With paid caregivers, it's going to be saying, hey, I need to look for a new job when this client passes away. With family members, it's going to be, I'm not going to be able to communicate with this loved one anymore. So I need to get those stories. I need to get that information, and I need to get those wishes before they lose that ability to communicate. So there are some benefits to anticipatory grief. Confronting the reality of death is also one of the benefits that we all have as caregivers and as family members. Even understanding the reality of our own mortality. It's in our culture, and I've heard it described as this. In the American culture, we treat death as we do pornography. It's something over here in the corner that we don't talk about. And that's how we consider death in our culture. And that's changing just a little bit, but it's certainly something that we avoid. And when we have anticipatory grief, when we see someone before our eyes passing, we begin to think about our own mortality. So this may help with getting yourself prepared for death as well. It allows you to the opportunity to deal with unfinished business. And this is one of those things that we talked about earlier, the what ifs. I should have said this. I should have said that. This is an opportunity for a caregiver or a family member um, to go to someone who's still living and to resolve unfinished business. Um, I'll give you an example, a short example here. I had a gentleman years and years ago when I first started working in healthcare, and he was very upset after his father passed away. And his father passed away suddenly, and he was a nurse. He was a nurse. I need to add that in there. He said, I was on the phone with my father the night before he died, and I heard a rattle in his breathing. He said, as I said it to myself, I said, that sounds like congestive heart failure. And his father died that night of a heart attack. Well, this young man took on full responsibility that he should have said something to his father, that if he had said something, it would have caused him to go to the hospital, that his father wouldn't have died. And he internalized this guilt about his father dying. Well, of course, it wasn't his fault, and he did eventually come to terms with that. But one of the benefits of anticipatory grief is being able to say these things to avoid those what if situations. What if I told my dad I loved him before he died? That's a good thing that we want to do. We want to make sure these things are in the open, not to distress the person or not to bring up old dirt, but to put a finalization on old unfinished business, and also saying goodbye. I think that that's important. Perhaps something that caregivers and especially family members may not have the bravery. How do I say that? That bravery to go in and say, Mom, I know that you're passing away. Goodbye. I want to say goodbye to you as your daughter, as your son, as your caregiver. I want to say goodbye to you. Don't be afraid to talk with people about their pending death. They know that they're dying. In fact, I believe that they know when they're dying and when they're going. I believe that they do have some choice in that matter, as they're reconciling with their maker. All right, let's go. And then, of course, making preparations. As we were talking about, Miss Fowler pointed this out. She's had opportunities to make preparations for her mother's passing, and one of the things that I didn't even think about was preparing in identifying and finding a good therapist, a counselor, somebody, a professional that you can work with on a regular basis who can get to know you as you move through these anticipatory stages. And so when that person does finally transition, you certainly have somebody in place that understands you and knows you, and that you can talk to. All right, before we go on, and I think I have time for this. This is a 10-minute video. It's going to give us an overview of anticipatory grief, and also it's going to put us on the road of talking about uh, these coping mechanisms, things that can help us in anticipatory grief and after we've lost that person. So I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to turn the video. Can everybody see the video okay? All
Yes.
right. Let me hit the play button. And I'll put myself on mute.
There's a special
John, I think you have to unmute yourself. We can't hear her. We can see the video, but we can't hear it.
you probably felt, even if you didn't know that that was the official term for it. Anticipatory from anticipating, which is there is this thing that I see coming down the tracks for me and I don't like it. And I have an emotional and relational response to this outcome that I dread. That's a lot of words to say. There is a thing that is very likely to happen, and I don't want it to happen. And I can feel myself reacting and responding and honestly worrying about what it's going to feel like when that thing I don't want actually arrives. So we're going to talk about what it is, what it feels like, and what you can do about it. So let's do a specific example. Let's say that your sister got a terminal diagnosis. You've been really fighting hard. You've been doing all of the things. They're drinking their green smoothies. They're thinking good thoughts, and nothing's working. The doctors have told you that there's nothing more they can do. And maybe it's 3 weeks, maybe it's 3 months. We don't know how much longer your sister has left. That is a big shift in emotion and intention. You have been working towards this goal of recovery. Maybe you've been thinking only good thoughts in your mind, not entertaining the idea that your person could die, because honestly, we don't want to vote for that future. And also because thinking about life without them is really painful. It's really overwhelming. We avoid grief for a reason. It's not something we ever want to experience. But now that we know that the end is actually coming, we start to feel what that loss will be like. Anticipatory grief is almost rehearsing what will happen later while you're still here in the now. It's really uncomfortable. What we tend to do when we're feeling anticipatory grief or a complex set of emotions when we're facing the death of someone we love is we pretend that everything is fine. For a lot of people, they don't want to waste the time that they have left with the person by being sad. They don't want to bum the other person out, but they also don't want to not have fun, not remember the good times, not sort of store up a warehouse of goodness for the coming sadness. One of the things that we do with emotionally difficult times, whether it's anticipatory grief or regular grief or just a crappy day, is we pretend we don't feel what we feel. This happens at end of life all the time. Just what I said about we don't want to waste the days, the weeks, the hours we have left by being sad with a person. The problem with that is sadness is in the room. Sadness is what is, and pretending it's not there, that's not going to make it go away. It is much more supportive. It is much more real to address the elephant in the room, address the emotional elephant in the room than it is to pretend you don't feel that way. So grief in the moment, grief before the death is still grief. You are grieving the loss of the alive and healthy and well person who used to be. You are grieving the life that you thought you were going to have together. You expected that your sister was going to live long enough to see your kids graduate from high school. None of that is going to happen anymore. When we don't talk about the grief or the sadness or the frustration or the other complex feelings that are in the room, not only do we act kind of awkward because we're trying to pretend that something isn't happening, but we also miss a real opportunity to connect with the person we love. I hear from so many people who are dying who say, I can't talk about how much I'm going to miss you. I can't talk about how sad I am that I'm not going to see my nieces and nephews and my kids grow up to graduate high school and embarrass her parents, right? We miss an opportunity to connect and to deepen our relationship when we pretend that grief isn't already here. We avoid it and then we regret it. So many people talk themselves out of their grief, talk themselves out of their sadness, decide not to bring it up because they don't want to change the mood or harsh somebody's joy or whatever. But what we're really doing is putting ourselves into an emotional debt that is going to be really impossible to repay later. So let's talk about how to talk about that elephant in the room. What I don't want for you is that you are suppressing or managing your sadness or your grief or your emotions in the moment, because that is going to come out sideways. You can say things like, hey, I find myself imagining what it's going to be like when you're gone, and I am so sad. And I notice that I don't want to be sad around you. Like, I want our last weeks and months together to be fun and silly, but it feels weird to say that I'm not also sad. Can we talk about that? Basically, what you're doing is just claiming your reality, and you're actually giving the person who is dying an opportunity to do the same. If you're never sad around your person, if you never say, I'm going to miss you so much, it gives the other person the idea that you don't want to talk about it. So many people silence themselves during their end of life time because they don't want to upset you. If you're not talking about sadness, they don't want to talk about sadness. So we're missing each other. What we really long for, everybody, is to be able to tell the truth about what's happening. That's all we want. So not saying it because you don't want to upset somebody else, and the other person is not saying something because they don't want to upset you, but we both want the same things. We're just not saying it out loud. Do the scary thing. You don't get a do-over, friends. It doesn't mean that you're going to be sad all the time. It just means that you're not expending energy pretending to not be sad. Yeah. So dealing with the grief that is already in the room. That's part one. Part two, the anticipatory part of anticipatory grief, is we start future tripping. The person is still here, but we're thinking about, what is it going to be like when they die? What is it going to be like when I can't call them anymore? What is it going to be like when I need something and they aren't here? We project ourselves into the future. It's a really normal human thing to do, is to project yourself into the future. The drag of that is you have no idea what it's going to be like. I don't want you to waste what is here now, present, by imagining a future that has not yet arrived. To be totally blunt about it, you cannot adequately prepare for what that's going to be like. You're not there yet. You've never been that person before. Trying to imagine what that's going to be like is a waste of your energy, and it's a waste of your heart. What you can do to prepare yourself for what is coming is listen to your own emotions. Start exploring, what do I need when I feel this way? What do I need when I am overcome with missing this person? Is there anything that feels soothing or supportive? There's also some really great self-talk you can do when you're catching yourself doing that future tripping. One, surprising no one, is to recognize what's happening. To be able to recognize I am living in a future that has not yet arrived interrupts that runaway train. It interrupts that thought of putting my right now self in a future experience when I really have no idea what that's going to be like. I'm going to call myself back to the present, right? Recognizing that you're living in a future that has not yet arrived. And on purpose, sometimes with great effort, you're going to bring yourself back to this present moment. You can't afford to live in the future. You will miss right now. You will miss right now if you live too much in the future. You don't get a do-over, friends. So many people who invested their time, invested their internal brain pictures, invested their emotional energy in trying to survive what hasn't yet arrived, that when that person dies and they're faced with that grief, one, they say, this is nothing like what I expected. And two, they say, I wasted so much time that I could have been spending with my person by worrying about what hadn't arrived yet. Again, it doesn't mean that there are no tools. It doesn't mean that it doesn't suck. It doesn't mean that you're not human. Human beings live in the future. It's part of our special weirdness. It's what we do, right? Calling yourself back when you recognize that you're doing it, and some really practical tools here. I trust myself that I will take care of myself no matter what arises. I trust that I will listen to myself to the best of my ability. These are the things that I will do because I have been doing them, because I have been paying attention to myself. I have been caring for myself. Letting yourself off the hook about having those answers for that future life, while simultaneously paying attention to what you need here, now, in this, that is way more effective than living a life too far in the future. So as always, I can kind of veer into the poetic, lyrical ways of dealing with grief, including anticipatory grief. But honestly, what we need are 3 actionable tools, right? A little bit of structure inside the amorphous nature of being human. So 1, what time zone are you in? Are you living right now in all of its complexity and messiness and honestly stuff you need to pay attention to? Or are you living in the future, right? So step 1 is check your time zone. Step 2, if there is an emotional elephant in the room, try naming it. Maybe you can't name it, and have that deep emotional conversation with the person who is dying. Maybe that's not an option for you, but telling yourself the truth, don't underestimate the power of that, right? So step 2, name the emotional elephant in the room. Step 3 is the really important part. What do I need when I'm feeling like this? I can't give you a step 3 of always do this because it depends. So much of being human depends. If you get into the habit of asking yourself, I feel like this, what do I need when I feel like this? Then you have a framework, a structure that you can carry around with you instead of carrying this gigantic tome of if then statements that tell you exactly what you need to do in certain situations. It's just much easier if you almost operationalize your emotional life, recognize what you're feeling, name it as normal, even if it's uncomfortable, and ask yourself, what do I need when I'm feeling like this? That is going to help you at the bedside when you are facing the end of life of someone you love, and it's going to help you after they die. It's the same mechanism. Paying attention to what is happening here, now, asking yourself what you need. That is how we build those muscles that help us survive whatever it is we need to survive.
Okay, that's she offers that much more eloquently than I would, but it's a good recap of everything. Megan Devine, and you can see her name there on the screen, offers a real treasure trove of videos, short videos like this on grief and grieving, and I've put the link at the end of the presentation here so that you can go back and see the other work she's done. It's been really good. And I encourage you to enjoy that. One of the things that she talked about is the elephant in the room, talking about the elephant in the room, and I picked up something that I didn't pick up before. Do the scary thing, she says. You know, that is hard. We need to do the scary thing in talking about the elephant in the room. As I'd mentioned before, our loved ones know when they're dying, and I feel, on a spiritual level, they have a determination on when that time is that they let go. So talk about these things that seem awkward, that seem wrong to talk about in anticipating someone's death. I'm going to have to put that one in my toolbox. Do the scary thing. I need to do the
There's
scary
a
thing
sec-
myself on times. And what she talked about at the end was basically coping strategies. And we're going to go through several coping strategies. Everyone's individual, so not every one of these things are going to be effective in your journey. Um, in fact, some are very effective, and some of them you can just, for individuals, they can just throw them out of the window. Um, so you have to really do some introspection on what is effective for you in coping strategies in anticipation of losing your loved one. Um, the first one we talk about is self-care. If you've been to any type of seminar like this and or a presentation and they hadn't talked about self-care, they're just not doing their job. Self-care is important. And it's something that we all need. It's taking time for yourself, doing something that it allows your mind, it allows your emotions to release your job stress. And I'm saying job stress for those who are paid caregivers, but alleviate your family stress as well in caring for a loved one. Relieve those anxieties and tensions that are built up throughout the week. Um, Give yourself time and place to focus on your own pleasure, your own freedom, an environment where it may be only just a few minutes where you can sit down and not have to think about the elephant in the room for a little while. Or give yourself time to process those. And I'll tell you, for myself, as I look up here in my office, I have little airplanes. You can't see them, but I can. Remote control airplanes. I go put on my shorts and I go out in the field and I put on some reggae music and I fly my little airplane. And it is the complete opposite of being a priest. It's the complete opposite of being a bereavement counselor. It's the complete opposite of working for hospice. It is my form of self-care, and I'm sure that you have something that allows you to get away and experience that self-care. And if you don't, you need to. It's important. It's very important. The next coping strategy that we have is talking to someone. Talking to someone is so valuable. Even if you don't want to talk to someone, it's very valuable. I have a little quote here, and I couldn't find the person who originated this quote, but I use it all the time. If you can share it, you can bear it. And that's something that I often offer to people who are just really emotional as they describe their circumstances. And I encourage them by saying, you're sharing it, though. You're bearing it. You're keeping these things out in the open, and you're able to walk this journey. It may hurt, but you can bear it if you can share it. So we all need someone to talk to, and that may be a therapist. As Miss Fowler mentioned earlier, that may be a therapist that you go to, or a close friend, or a relative, to be able to talk with those and share those hard feelings, share those scary things that we talked with that she talked about earlier. Expressing your feelings is something that's kind of hard for us men to do, but when we're able to find someone that we trust, someone that we hold close, we can express those emotions, anger, sadness, fear. Um, Expressing these emotions allows us to bear them. Also, expressing the emotions physically, crying, screaming, pounding your fist on the table. Allowing yourself a safe way to express those emotions is important. And having someone to express those emotions to is also important. It helps us to build that muscle that we need to survive this hard road of anticipatory grief. Now, we mentioned individual cases, and this is a part of those individual cases. Some people really benefit from journaling, putting their thoughts, ideas, and emotions down on paper in a journal or a book. And some people just don't. So it depends on if you are a writer, if you're able to express yourself, or it's maybe something you might want to look into. Give it a try. But there's some who just they don't want to have anything to do with journaling. Oh, I tried that and it just doesn't work, and that's okay because grief is individual, and so we have to deal with that individually. And seeking professional help. We mentioned that before. If the anticipatory grief is weighing on you to the point that your health is compromised, and then it's time to seek professional help. If you see a change in your eating habits or a change in your sleeping patterns that is destructive, you might want to take time to check in with your physician to see what's going on. A lot of times, grief response, anticipatory grief response, I can't sleep at night. All I do is think about X, Y, and Z. Well, you need to sleep at night. It's important. It's part of your physiological processing of this death. And so you need to take care of yourself by going to the doctor. Or I can't eat anymore. I'm losing weight. You know, it, that's probably a part of grief for a very short time. But if it lasts more than a week or so and you're losing weight and losing muscle mass because you're not eating or eating too much, then perhaps you need to see your physician. So this is an important part of caring for yourself is maintaining care for your body. And I found something that was very interesting in the National Library of Medicine, and it was a study that was done specifically on caregivers, family caregivers of patients with Alzheimer's related dementia. And it found that 18% of the spouses with Alzheimer's related dementia were dying before the person with Alzheimer's related dementia. Now, this was specifically looking at dementia-related caregivers, but I imagine there is probably some correlation to those who are dying with other diseases. Um, and there is certainly some correlation with the stress on the caregiver and terminal illness. This is all a part of that anticipatory grief. So it's so important for you as a caregiver, a family member, or a paid caregiver to manage your own health. Self care is managing your own health and being able and willing to go and to do these things. Now, lastly, you're going to get to hear a little bit of religion here. Don't give up hope. My goodness. How are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do when we know that our loved one is dying? They have a terminal illness. We see the decline day to day, and we know that we're going to die. They know that they're going to die. Should we just abandon all hope? No. You should never let yourself abandon hope. Perhaps you should redefine what hope is. We know that Miss Jones is going to die, but I have hope that she'll get to see all of her family before she does. I know that Mr. Jones is going to pass away, but perhaps he'll get to eat his favorite treat before he dies. I have a hope that their death will be a release from sickness and from pain, from what they're feeling right now. And I have a hope that when this person dies, when my person dies, I have a hope that they're going to heaven. I think that's the best hope of all because we all have to walk down that road of death. We all have to watch others walk down that road of death. And it's good to have that spiritual aspect in our lives. That's the preacher talking in me now. So don't give up hope. As you're dealing with your loved one, you're dealing with your mother or your father, in-laws, don't give up hope. Don't let them give up hope. You may have to redefine it a little bit, but don't give it up. And so that's pretty much it. It didn't quite get an hour and a half, but we'll have some questions and answers, hopefully.
Thank you, John. That was fantastic. I think we all learned a lot. Oh, and look at those resources. Those are great. And yeah, I'm definitely going to send out to everyone on the call today the link to Megan Devine's YouTube short. That was terrific as
Yeah.
well. And
I
I think
have a,
that's,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you. I
go
just have
ahead.
a question for Father.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, what would you, what advice you could give me, or what you could tell me to kind of say to my twin sister, because right now I'm kind of stuck.
Mhm.
I don't want to say the wrong thing, to her, but I want to at least, it's been a day now. Should I contact her or now? Because I know she's grieving. Or if I do, should I send a text? Should I call? Or, and if I do, and if you do say do one of those things, what would I say?
Okay. Well,
Or if I just, should I just not bother at all?
no, I think that absolutely you should reach out to her, even if it is uncomfortable for you or for her. Reach out to her and let her know that you're thinking of her,
Okay.
um, and listen to her instead of what can I say to her?
Okay.
What can she say to you?
Sure. Okay.
Be her person to listen, kind of be that ear that's there to listen.
I
Because when
see.
she shares it, like we said earlier, when you share it, you can bear it. When she shares it, that's actually releasing that pain and giving it a place to go. And folks remember um, the people who called at the time of death. They may not remember who it was, but they remember what's said. And sometimes we say the wrong things, and we just need to be quiet and listen. And I think
Yes.
that is probably one of the best helps to others is providing that listening ear.
Yeah, well, thank you because I'm just a mess right now because I'm just as sad as she is about his loss. So I don't want to call her up and cry and and I don't need to do that. So thank you so much for the advice. I think that's good.
Yeah, this is a time you just need to love on her.
Yeah, you're right.
Hmm.
Oh, it's so hard. I mean, they've been married for almost 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he's like 20 years older than her, but still,
Hmm.
it's
Wow.
been a long time he's been in this family and that they have been together. So it's going to be a great loss. You talk about finances, his loss because he's a 20-year retired veteran and plus he retired from the city. So she very much depended on his income to
Oh,
live off. So she's
no
going to lose
kidding.
some of those things. So
Wow. Yeah, that's very difficult.
yes. So I learned a lot here. Thank you so much. It was perfect timing.
Oh, good. Good. Thank you for sharing.
Sure. Thank you. And all the rest of the ladies, I learned something from them as well.
Father John, thank you for focusing so much on self-care. That is definitely one of the themes of our program here at the Span Center. Everything we do, we're always banging on about self-care, how to take care of yourself so you can take care of others. So I appreciate that you really focused on that. And in terms of we also focus a lot on community here in our caregiver support. And so we do have support groups that, as I mentioned earlier, they're open to everyone to come talk about their caregiving experiences. And that is a great way to bear it by sharing it. Um,
Absolutely. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
and also just to recognize that you're not alone in this journey. Other people are having the same struggles or ridiculous things happening because they're caring for someone with Alzheimer's, and sometimes goofy things happen, and it's helpful to have someone to share those maudlin jokes with sometimes, or that black humor sometimes from other people who know exactly what you're going through. So I would encourage everyone on this call to please join us for support groups or find other ones, and just keep talking about what's going on with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyone else want to share anything? All right, well then I will start closing out, but I did want to mention Lauren spoke earlier about having part part of this caregiving phase is also planning ahead for the future and getting all your legal documents in order. And I just wanted to remind everyone that the Span Center does offer senior law days. I put that over in the chat. That's where we offer free preparation with documents that everyone needs, your advanced care planning, your will, your advanced care directive, and your power of attorney. So if you have any questions about how to access those services, give us a call as well. And any way that the Span Center can support y'all, please reach out and we will do our very best. And I also want to extend a very hearty thank you to Father John. This was wonderful. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Where is Donna
she wanted to know about finding a good Christian therapist. If Donna's in the city of Richmond or thereabouts, the Virginia Institute for Pastoral Care, which is over near Target on Broad Street, is a really good faith-based pastoral counseling center. So they might be a resource.
Thank you. I'll also share that Jewish Family Services, they have a program for families dealing with dementia. It's a caregiver support program, and they offer individual counseling to the caregivers, and they also help you come up with some techniques and strategies to manage your care with your loved ones. And that's the Jewish Family Services, and that program is called Families. You can just give them a call and tell them you're interested in that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, but VIP Care is, yeah, Jewish Family Services is really good too. And I think VIP Care has a like a sliding scale for people that are, if you're if you're caregiving and the money's really tight, they recognize that. So.
All right. Well, thank y'all. Have a good
Thank you.
week, and reach out to Darius and I if we can help in any way.
Bye.
Thank you, Adrian,
Goodbye.
Darius,
Thank you.
Thank you. It was
Adrian.
good to
Father.
see so many
Thank
of
you.
you.
Thank you, Father. Bye-bye.
Yeah, this was great.
It was.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a good day,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you. Bye.